Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you had a terrific lunch and had a chance to talk to some of the other people at your table. If I could ask, please join me in welcoming our webcast viewers. My name is Andrew Graham. I'm president of the Canadian Club of Toronto, and I'm your host for today. Normally I don't get applause at that line, but my mom's in the room today, so I think people were told to be extra nice. Thank you. Thank you. I would have been fine with no heckling, so the applause is actually nice. So when you want to hear directly from business leaders and political leaders, we really hope that you think of the Canadian Club as the first place you go to. We've been really proud to have quite a number of political leaders and business leaders and leaders from the arts and other sectors at our podium in the past weeks and months, and really strive to bring people who are doing exciting things and making a real difference in the city, in the province, and in the country. And I think today's speaker is very much of that type, and we're really pleased to have her here. I'll be introducing her in a minute. I'd like to say, though, that we are very thankful for the sponsorship and support we get from a number of different organizations. Today we have Bruce Power, represented by Patrick Dalzell, CAA represented by Teresa DeFelice, and the Ontario Real Estate Association represented by Tim Hudak. Thanks to the three of you. And then we also have a table of young leaders from U of T. Where are you? Thank you for being here, and thanks very much to Simon Dwyer from Bell Canada. Bell Canada supported the table, so thank you very much, Bell Canada, as well. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker. Andrea Horwath is not shy about making her views known about the government's policy and fiscal plans. Indeed, when you're the leader of the official opposition, that's kind of your job. Speaking up and speaking out comes naturally for this Hamiltonian who has been in politics, whether municipal or provincial, for more than 2 decades. And I heard a great story about Ms. Horwath over lunch. When, she's, I think, very much used to breaking barriers and doing things differently. When she became leader of the official opposition after the last election, she was shown her new office and told that it was prepared for, it's ready for her. Here's the office of the leader of the official opposition. And there's a bathroom attached to it, and she went into the bathroom, and there was instructions on the wall about how to tie a tie. So, you can tell that she's used to being a trailblazer and doing things differently. So we're really excited to hear her perspective today. Her perspective has been formed from a career in government, from a career in community development as well as local government. As the MPP for Hamilton Centre, she's been called the People's Champion. She continues to fight for more affordable standard of living and good accessible services for all Ontarians. Let's hear her alternative vision now. Ms. Horwath, I'm pleased to pass the Canadian Club of Toronto's podium over to you.
So real quick, Tim Hudak says that picture of the diagram of how to tie a tie, a full Windsor and a half Windsor, with instructions about which is formal and which is business, wasn't there when he was there. So it was either Patrick Brown or Vic Fideli that needed those instructions, right? That's what we just deduced. Well, hello everyone, and bonjour tout le monde. It's certainly my pleasure to be here with you today. Je vous remercie votre présence aujourd'hui. I want to begin by acknowledging, of course, that we are meeting today on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, the Métis, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. And as we meet here today, let us renew our commitment as Ontarians to true and meaningful reconciliation based on respect, cooperation, and action to make people's lives better and build communities that are stronger across our province. Thank you. And thank you very much, Andrew, for that kind introduction. It was fun to get to know your mom a little bit earlier on in the reception. I appreciate that. Thank you to the Canadian Club for having me here today, and to the sponsors of the event for making it possible for us to all get together this afternoon, and especially to all of you for taking time out of your schedules to join me today. It is absolutely my pleasure and has been my pleasure as leader of the Ontario NDP and as leader of the official opposition to meet and work with many of you over the years. In this room, there are leaders across multiple sectors, investors, business owners, leaders in not-for-profit enterprises and in labor, and each of you is a vital partner in building and cultivating the prosperity and security that we all deserve in this great province. I know that everyone in this room shares a commitment to a strong, prosperous, thriving Ontario. I also know that we don't always agree on exactly how to get there, but today, especially in light of the Ford government's first budget, I want to share with you an alternative vision, what I believe to be a better way forward for Ontario. It's a vision for a province where government is accountable, transparent, and predictable, where decisions about things that matter most to people don't seem arbitrary. A place where government is serious about the key role that it plays in providing a stable environment, a climate where businesses of all sizes, in all sectors, can thrive. I envision, as I know many of you do, a province where businesses and investors have fewer shocks and surprises to contend with. One where you don't have to worry about what the government's going to do next, because there's a clear plan based on the best research, data, and advice available. And the government has shared that blueprint for all of us to see, so that everyone, business, investors, and labor, know what to expect in the next quarter, the next year, the next 5 years. This is a vision for a province that sees the big picture and listens to investors, labor, working people, and businesses of all sizes, because everyone has a role in that big picture. I envision more good-paying quality jobs that empower people to raise a family and retire with dignity. A future in which Ontarians can get to and from work safely and affordably, with less congestion, fewer delays, and shorter commutes. So people spend less time stuck in the car or on transit, and more time fueling our economy and spending time with their loved ones. In the Ontario I envision, we're able to attract and retain the best labor force in the world because we've invested in a world-class education system, from childcare through to post-secondary, and because we fortified and expanded our public health care system so that no person and no business has to worry about the cost of people getting sick. Friends, those are my goals, the future that I'm working towards. Now, I hate to state the obvious, but I don't think that's what we're seeing out of Doug Ford and his government. And I don't think that's what we saw in Doug Ford's first budget. I've got to say I was shocked when I saw this budget. You know, obviously I'm not a conservative, and so I expect the budget to be disappointing. It's what I expected. In fact, I expected it to be painful for a lot of people. But what I did not expect, what I was completely stunned by, was the total lack of a coherent vision for our province and where we're headed. It's a budget that decimates education and job training by cutting $700 million from colleges, universities, and skills training, and that's just the beginning. It's a budget that cuts $185 million from economic development, job creation, and trade. That's a 20% cut. Since December, China has approved over $200 billion in infrastructure investing. For Ontario to be competitive in a global economy, this government should be significantly ratcheting up infrastructure investing. Instead, they're carving $290 million off the previous government's infrastructure commitments. They're ripping over $500 million out of the Ministry of Energy, Northern Development and Mines. And they're cutting the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund, forcing municipalities into a corner. You know, when things get too tight, what are those municipalities going to do? They're going to claw back the services that everyone counts on, or raise property taxes. We all agree that regulatory approvals for business need to be clear, they need to be fair, and they need to work on a reasonable timeline. But cutting these ministries is going to have the opposite effect. But Ford's first budget is also a budget that spends. Doug Ford is spending to put little blue open for business billboards on the back of commercial vehicles. Now, I've listened to businesses, to business owners, to economic development organizations throughout the province, to chambers, to boards of trade, from small and scaling companies to big corporations. They talk about the need for educating, training, and attracting a trained and stable, skilled workforce. We were just having that conversation a few minutes ago at our table. They talk about the need to get overhead costs, like electricity, down. But no one, I can guarantee you, not one person has ever said to me, Andrea, what's really going to help grow our business and create jobs is border signs and license plates. Nobody's ever said that to me. So yes, overall, this is a budget that spends big. In fact, it spends about $5 billion more than Kathleen Wynne's final budget. But only Doug Ford could spend $5 billion more than Kathleen Wynne while still slashing social services, squeezing patients and students, and walking away from business development. And I'm going to happily give credit where credit is due and say that there's one particular measure in this budget that I was pretty okay with. And that was the rollout of a manufacturing investment incentive in the form of an accelerated capital write-off. It's something that I've pushed for and put in our platforms in the past. And I still think it's the right thing to do. So I will congratulate the government on that. But overall, if you don't work in alcohol or gaming, if you don't want to bring a big private US university to Ontario, if you don't manufacture license plates, this budget just doesn't reflect your priorities. And it's not going to make things better for you. And for students, for children, especially vulnerable children, for patients and families, this budget is delivering a huge dose of pain and choking out options and opportunities for all kinds of people, squeezing healthcare to below the rate of inflation and far below the much higher healthcare inflation rates, especially at a time when the costly upending of the healthcare system is apparently underway. It's only going to lead to more and more wait times, longer waits for patients. It's going to lead to more patients stacked in hallways. It's going to lead to more people suffering in a healthcare system that was and can be world-class, but has been left hanging by a thread by the former government. And funding public schools below the rate of inflation, allowing schools across the province to fall even further into disrepair, slashing valuable courses, electives, and programs for kids, and firing thousands of teachers and education workers at the same time as we're trying to help kids get better at math? Bad idea. Bad idea. Far too often, decisions in Ontario these days feel as though they're disjointed. Each decision feels like it's based on who has Mr. Ford's ear in any given moment, instead of what's best for Ontario's people and Ontario's economy. Instead of a big picture, a blueprint of a vision for the Ontario that we can all get behind and work towards, we have a patchwork of schemes. Decisions like meddling in Hydro One to settle old political scores. Decisions like ripping up contracts in the green energy sector and passing laws to stop those businesses from suing the government for breach of contract, more of which, of course, we found in the budget, as the government is going to now bring in legislation, or has brought in legislation, that's going to prevent everybody and anyone from getting any kind of justice if the government causes harm to people or businesses. These decisions are not backed by data, by evidence, or by sound advice. At best, it's short-term thinking that we have with this government. When big changes like these are made with no warning and no consultation, and when the plan has been hidden from you and from me and from potential investors in Ontario, we've seen what happens. Look no further than the $200 million in fines and penalties for Ford's decision to meddle in Hydro One, not to mention a credit rating downgrade for the whole province. This way of doing things makes it harder for everyone to do business. It undermines confidence because investors, businesses, and working people never know what will happen next. Let's be clear. This lack of predictability and transparency is not unique to the present government. It was on full display with the previous Liberal government, which made a habit of dramatically changing course with desperate announcements come election time. But I gotta tell you, putting up signs at the border and churning out new license plate slogans is not going to move our province forward. The best pathway forward, the path I push for every day at Queen's Park, that I would walk along with all of you if I were to become Premier, is rooted in predictability, in transparency, in collaboration, and in accountability. Because businesses should be able to trust that the contracts they sign with government are going to be upheld. They should be able to plan with some certainty for the future, and investors should look at Ontario as a safe bet. These are exactly the kinds of things that make it possible for us all to work together and build a more prosperous province. It's no secret to anybody in this room that I opposed pausing the minimum wage at $14 an hour. Everybody knows the position that the NDP took. Because I believe deeply in respecting working people, and I feel strongly that everyone who works in Ontario should be able to afford to build a good life here. But it's also no secret that I have been calling for a minimum wage increase for many, many, many years now. So while you may not agree with me on the minimum wage, you can be sure that I wouldn't spring it on the business community 3 months before an election day out of political desperation. Because as I've mentioned, I believe that stability and predictability in government are what allow us to look ahead. They're what allow us all to contribute to the direction that we're headed. They're essential to growth. You know, we must also address the big things, like sound infrastructure planning and investment, so we can move our province forward. And that means making sizable investments in education and training, from taking meaningful action to fund and fix our kids' schools, to ensuring that college and university costs stop being a drag on the upward mobility for young people entering the workforce. It means that instead of canceling the construction of multiple university campuses, the most recent one was just announced last night, with $20 million being taken away from the renovations of the Ontario College of Art and Design. Instead of picking fights with educational institutions and threatening their funding, I would seize opportunities to become more competitive in the global economy by expanding Ontario's capacity for research, innovation, and excellence. I would catalyze economic activity in fast-growing municipalities like Brampton, Markham, and Milton. And I would get their university campuses built. Moving forward in our vision to build the economy and the workforce of the future means working to ensure that everyone can get a quality, steady job so they can build a good life for their families and contribute to growing our economy. It also means the government needs to ensure that all of us, as workers, businesses, investors, and Ontarians, are supported by an accessible, high-quality public healthcare system. And that means we must be vigilant in protecting our public healthcare system. But it also means that government should come to the table with a vision for how to move us all forward. Just imagine when we expand Medicare to include drug and dental benefits for Ontarians. It's not only going to make people healthier and stop them from ending up in our ERs, it's also going to take employee prescription costs off the ledgers of businesses. It'll make Ontario even more attractive for investors. And it will help our province attract the best workers in the world. Imagine a government doing the hard work of maintaining and improving and expanding transit and transportation, listening to commuters about how to get them to work more quickly, and respecting and working with local governments. Not tearing up plans that have been years in the making and throwing hundreds of millions of dollars and years of planning work into the dumpster. Because the resulting delays, the years and years of delays and inflating costs from Doug Ford doing that, are not only frustrating for commuters, they're unattractive to investors. Efficient, affordable transit, good roads, sustain our workforce. They get our goods to market. They are the lifeblood of communities, along with widespread broadband that includes rural and remote regions of our province, and efficient interconnected rail. Imagine a province providing these services at the high level that we need to make Ontario more connected, more prosperous, and a more desirable place to live and invest. You know, at the root of my vision for the future is an understanding that I think all of us in this room share. It's the government's responsibility to put forward a clear, coherent, evidence-driven vision for the future. To respect Ontarians enough to listen, consult, and make the necessary changes to get things right. And to roll out these plans with predictability, with transparency and accountability, so that businesses, investors, and workers have the stable environment that they need and deserve. To ensure our province grows and thrives. Now, I know that when we work together, we can absolutely attract the world's best, and we can create even more opportunity for everyone. Ontarians have so much more in common than what divides us. We share a vision of a vibrant place, vibrant communities, world-class healthcare, more opportunity and less debt for families, and prosperity for all. And I know that together we can deliver on a shared vision to make Ontario the best place in the world, to build a great business and a great life. I want to thank you very much for your kind attention. Merci beaucoup, miigwech, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Well, thank you very much for those remarks, and we'll do a proper thank you in a minute. But first, we've had a number of questions excuse me, come in from the audience, and would love to hear your thoughts on a few issues. First of all, the Premier says that health and education budgets are increasing, and you're talking about cuts. Can you help reconcile those different points of view?
Yes, absolutely, I can. I think the most important thing to remember is that we have something called inflation. That's not news to anybody in this room. And so when the government funds education and healthcare at less than the rate of inflation, that leads to cuts. I mean, you have to find the money somewhere. If your budget is increasing because of inflationary pressures and your funding is kept at a level that's below the amount to fund those pressures, then you have to make cuts in order to make up for the lack of funding to cover off inflation. And so this government, in its budget, identifies inflation at 1.9%, and is funding education at 1.6, education at 1.2, and healthcare at 1.6. Healthcare inflation runs much higher than regular inflation. In fact, the Financial Accountability Officer of the Province of Ontario said that it would take a 4% annual increase just to maintain the existing system, so without any real increases in capacity. The government's funding at 1.6, not at regular inflation rate of 1.9, nor at the 4% that the FAO is talking about. And in fact, other experts in the healthcare field peg healthcare inflation to run at about 5.3% annually. So it's very, very clear that when you're not funding to inflation or to healthcare inflation, you are going to end up cutting back on a healthcare system. And when we know that the government's got these plans to overhaul or upend our healthcare system, I mean, they should be putting even more money in to allow them to have the flexibility to make the changes that they're talking about in their legislation, Bill 74. So that's the story. I mean, yes, in terms of raw numbers, there might be a small increase in the actual budget line, but when you look at the inflationary pressures and the need to fund to cover inflation, it just doesn't make the mark. And just so that you know, the last budget that the previous government tabled, they were funding hospitals at about $300 odd million less than what the Ontario Hospital Association had requested in pre-budget hearings, meaning that the hospitals that were already not able to provide the kind of quality of service that we want, leading to hallway medicine, we saw that the hospital system continued to struggle. The same hospital groups made presentations to the pre-budget hearings this year, back in January, February, and unfortunately, the budget did not, again, meet the request of the hospitals to maintain a broken system. Again, funding almost $300 million less than what the request was. So I mean, this is where the difference is, the raw line numbers versus the inflationary pressures and the need to fund to cover inflation off.
Great. Well, that segues nicely into another question that we got. Given the inflation-adjusted cuts in education, what advice do you have for students and young job seekers who are nervous about what's happening?
Well, my advice is hold on for 3 years and we're going to get rid of this government. There's hope for the future. Although I guess I shouldn't say that. What's the phrase that, so I think Jason Kenney just used it last night, help is on the way in 4 years' time, well, 3 now. No, but seriously though, it's going to be a difficult time for young people. There are going to be likely disruptions in the classroom. We're going to see a lot of adults being pulled out of schools, whether that be primary schools or secondary schools. We see the cost of post-secondary education is going to be increasing. The government's made decisions when the decision was made to back away from the changes that the former government had made, I had students approaching me in tears, telling me that they were finishing off school thinking that they'd have about $2,000 in debt, and now that's jumped to $14,000 just overnight because of the government's announcements. It doesn't have to be that way in our province. We can find a way to help young people achieve their goals in post-secondary education in quality institutions and still be able to graduate without a mountain of debt that holds them back from their forward trajectory in life, and we're committed to doing that. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be rocky for young people, and I think one of the things that I would recommend and suggest is to make sure that you're doing everything you can as an individual to connect with other people and get some solidarity happening, if you want to call it that. Some collective work together will help them get through. We saw those students come out to protest the cuts to education just a couple weeks ago. 100,000 students in high schools took to the streets to tell the government they didn't want their education system to be eroded or to be affected in a way that was going to have negative outcomes for them and their colleagues. And I think that that's one way to help them get through, is to realize that they're not alone. And as their education continues to be threatened by this government, or as they see changes that are troubling in their schools, they need to support each other. They need to be talking to their parents, and they need to be active. They need to have their voices heard. And hopefully with that, the government will acknowledge and admit that the changes they're making are harmful to students, and we might perhaps be able to get some changes made. Having said that, I mean, it's worrisome and it's frustrating, and I was very, very proud of the young people in Ontario when they took that upon themselves. And I can tell you, it was not the union thugs that told those kids to get out on the streets. They have lots of opportunities to connect with each other through social media in a way that they really haven't done in the past, to mobilize the way that they did. And I'm really proud that they had that foresight to work together to have their voices collectively heard. I went out on the lawn of Queen's Park to talk to some of those young people, and I was quite surprised. I mean, I didn't just talk to people that were speaking at the microphones. I went, mingled amongst the crowd, just, happenstance, bumping into this person and that person, kids that were, 14, 15 years old, 13 years old, asking them, why are you here? What's going on? And each and every one of them had an articulate and thoughtful response about why it is that they were there, what it was that they were fighting for, what it is that they're worried about. And that was pretty amazing. I mean, I don't think that I was doing that when I was 13, 14 years old. I might have been smoking behind the school, but I certainly wasn't protesting about the future of my education.
We only have time for one more question, and we won't focus on what you did when you were in school. I think it's a question relating to your experience and expertise, having seen up close and in some cases worked with them when they were in opposition, the people that are forming the current government. And it's really a question, I guess, about what is motivating the current government. Specifically, the budget is called Protecting What Matters. What do you think the budget is protecting, or who do you think it's protecting?
That's a really good question. I think there's a dissonance between the title of that budget and what's actually in the pages of the budget. And that's pretty frustrating. One of the things that we discovered, though, recently, buried in the back of one of the schedules in that budget, is the changes that are actually going to protect the government. I alluded to it in my speech. Protect the government from being sued by businesses or by communities, by groups of people, class action suits in the future, and not only for future actions, but retroactively. So we know that there are currently lawsuits that have been launched, for example, from young people who have been in solitary confinement. Perhaps that's now not going to be able to go forward because the government's changing the rules midstream. So I don't know that they're protecting anybody but their own interests, for fear that the changes that they are going to make are going to cause such disruption that there will be further lawsuits. I mean, we've seen what they've done with the green energy sector and all those companies that were basically their right to sue the government for breach of contract was legislated away. That's pretty worrisome in my estimation. What does that say about a government? That they don't even value one of the basic tenets of a legal system, which is the right to natural justice. That's pretty troubling, frankly. And so that's the only thing that I see being protected. I'm quite concerned about the disruption that's headed our way, and most importantly, the impact it's going to have on people and families. And I think that impact on people and families is also going to impact the stability of our economy and our business community and our business and the likelihood of investors seeing Ontario as a stable place to invest. Thanks.
Well, that was a really terrific set of remarks and answers to the questions that were posed. On behalf of the Canadian Club of Toronto and everyone in the room, thank you for sharing your thoughts on the budget and more broadly your vision for where you'd like to take Ontario, where you think Ontario should go in today and in the years ahead. Obviously, it's at the heart of democracy to be able to offer alternative points of view and have lots of healthy debate. And you've really shown that you bring a lot of intelligence and passion and thoughtfulness and caring to the discussion. So thank you so much for being with us today and sharing all of that with us, the Leader of the Official Opposition, Andrea Horwath. Just before we conclude, I'll let you know about a few events that are coming up in the next few weeks that I think are going to be really exciting. First, we're hosting an event about diversity. Diversity is something we care a lot about at the Canadian Club. And the event is called Being Brown Downtown. It's an intriguing panel that discusses the lived experience of ethnic minorities in corporate Canada. I think it's going to be a really fascinating discussion. That's on the 30th of April. And on May 9th, we're welcoming a panel discussion on how Canada is leading in medical cannabis. So I think that will also be a really interesting discussion. I hope you can attend both of those. Before we conclude, I'd like to extend another round of thanks to Bruce Power, CAA, and the Ontario Real Estate Association for sponsoring this event. And I'd also like to thank MediaEvents.ca, Canada's online event space, and VVC for live streaming today's event. And of course, a big thank you to all of you for attending. See you again soon. Have a great afternoon.